Coleman McNear, thank you so much for coming on to Talk Beliefs to talk about your time in a Christian reform camp. So how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good today. I got to, today was my day to sleep in. I have a 19-month-old daughter, so I like it when I get my days to sleep in.
You currently live in Boise, Idaho with your wife and own a home healthcare business, but your early life was extremely troubled, as we'll find out, culminating 18 months in the religious behavioral modification camp known as Project Patch, located in Garden Valley, Idaho. So let's begin by you giving us an overview of your early life and what series of events led your parents to consider you a troubled teen.
My biological mother passed away when I was very young. My father struggled with mental illness and drug addiction for my entire life, and he was extraordinarily abusive physically and emotionally. So the way that things were dealt with in my family was, when you were misbehaving, it was sort of, send you away, make it somebody else's problem. That was just sort of the way that things happened, And so the first time I got sent away was when I was 9. I went to boarding school. It was actually a really, really nice place, and I ended up electing to stay for a much longer period than I was told I had to go for a year, but I elected to stay for 5. But when I came back home at the age of 14, I really didn't know how to cope and live in a family unit. At this point, I had 3 younger siblings, and of course, I had an older sibling as well. And my younger siblings really just didn't even know who I was. I had been away for so long that I wasn't really a member of the family, and everybody had their own routines. So when I started going to, regular day school, I just couldn't really cope, and I got heavily involved into drugs pretty quickly. Got suspended from school a couple of times because of drugs. Got sent to rehab for the first time when I was 14 because of drugs. And when I was 15 and my parents were going through the middle of their divorce, my family was living in Portland at this point, and I was in downtown Portland looking for drugs. And I very, very stupidly followed a drug dealer back to his apartment, and I was raped by the drug dealer and the drug dealer's friend. Yeah, I was dealing heavily with depression because of, the all of the loss and stuff that I'd suffered throughout my life, and then, on top of that, being raped at a very, young and vulnerable age, and not having anybody to speak to about it, and feeling like there was nobody I could go to. It was just extraordinarily traumatic and extraordinarily hard. And so, after trying to kill myself a number of different ways, whether walking in traffic and trying to make it look like I'd gotten accidentally hit by a car, or trying to accidentally drug overdose. One night I took just every drug I had on me, uppers, downers, LSD, drank, smoked weed, and ended up throwing myself out of a 3rd-story window, which resulted in me crushing 2 of my vertebrae and becoming paralyzed from the waist down. I spent a couple months in the hospital. I had to have a couple of surgeries so that I could not only live but walk again. And it was pretty difficult. Because when I got out of the hospital, the day that I was discharged, this entire time I thought I was going back to live with my mom, but my parents were in the middle of a divorce at that point. But I really wanted to live with my mom because my father was impossible. Unfortunately, my mother made the decision that I was just too much to handle, and she told me that she had to protect her children and that she didn't feel that her children were safe around me, which was a pretty hard thing to hear because I thought that I was one of her children. But, at the end of the day, I guess I wasn't. Or maybe I am. I don't know. It's kind of difficult. She was a very, very, or is a very, very lovely, lovely woman. I went to go live with my father, which was just a nightmare. He was extraordinarily abusive during this time, just really on a basically daily basis because, as he said, he was not going to have an invalid for a daughter. And during this time, unbeknownst to me, he was looking for somewhere to send me, to fix me, because that was, it's my entire life. That was always what he said, why can't I just find somebody to fix my daughter? What ended up happening was a woman that was working for my stepmother would let me spend weekends with her to sort of let me get away from my dad. But she had heard through her church about this place that was a sort of reform type school that took broken, damaged, unruly teenagers and turned them into perfect students, perfect kids, just model citizens. And I guess it sounded great to my father. I think that my father chose it because he really liked the strict atmosphere.
So your siblings' nanny recommends this religious boot camp to your dad, and despite your dad not having a religious bone in his body, he decides to send you there, as you said. And this was a Seventh Day Adventist facility, is that right?
Yeah, and what's really funny is, the day that we got there, they made this big deal about how, oh, well, we're really not, we're not a religious facility per se. They make this huge deal about it, their promotional material doesn't talk a lot about the religious aspect, and they made it sound, when I got there, I was a little worried about it too, because I was not religious either. I didn't even know if I believed in God, to be quite frank. And they were just like, oh, no. The religious aspect is completely voluntary. You don't have to participate in anything. You do have to attend the services, but you don't have to participate in the services. That was always the thing, You have to, you'll have to be a prayer group, but you don't have to participate in prayer group. Just please be respectful. And so I thought, okay, fine, whatever. I can deal with that. But that could not have been further from the truth. I learned.
What does PATCH stand for, by the way?
It stands for Planned Assistance for Troubled Children.
So there's nothing overtly religious in that.
Yeah, not in the title, because some of these places have very overtly religious titles, but this place does not. And I think that might be because there are, or at least when I went there, I don't know if this is true anymore, but at least when I went there, there were residents there that were being paid for by the state of Oregon and by the state of Washington as sort of a alternative to juvenile hall. And so I imagine that the reason that, I can't speak for them, but I imagine, that they would have lost that income stream because the state can't be funding an overtly religious organization. The religion part was not optional. You had to participate. If you did not participate, or even worse, if you questioned them ever, you would get into extraordinary trouble. Questioning the Bible, questioning their very specific, strict interpretation of the Bible was absolutely forbidden. If you did, you were going to get in trouble. Sometimes they would even, have that under the guise of, oh, well, it wasn't that you were questioning the Bible, it was your tone of voice, or it was your word choice. But it wasn't. It was just painfully obvious that they never wanted residents questioning their teachings, especially in front of other residents. Maybe if you were one-on-one with a counselor, you could get away with a little bit more questioning, but in front of other residents, you absolutely could never question it.
So you soon found out that the religious side of this place was definitely not optional, but you also found out that there were very strict rules and very harsh punishments if any of the kids there got into trouble. Can you tell us about those incidents?
Everything was a privilege, sitting on furniture was a privilege. And then it could go all the way up to being put into what they called therapeutic restraints, which would be where they would force you to lay face down on the ground with your legs crossed so that you couldn't get up easily. And you'd place your hands crossed in the small of your back. And you'd be forced to lay there until they deemed that, they were not a threat, or, you weren't gonna cause any more trouble. And I mean, there were times when, and I was just, months coming off of a broken back injury. And there were times where they would make me lay in this position for 3-4 hours at a time, with occasionally a staff member coming by and, placing their foot into the small of my back and just standing there. And they would just laugh about it. The staff.
And were you on the wooden floor or on the grass or?
Concrete, gravel, wooden floor. It never happened on carpet, oddly enough. They never seemed to choose it then. It was always when there was an incredibly rough surface for you to be laying on.
Jeez.
The snow, they didn't care. Yeah. And God forbid if you ever tried to, run away from a staff member, because then you would get taken down forcibly. I've seen a cougar be more gentle to a goat, quite frankly.
And they call these takedowns, don't they?
Yeah, and they called them takedowns. Yeah, that was what they referred to them as.
And worse than that was something called the phase, wasn't it? Can you tell us what happens if?
Yeah. So phase was a form of punishment, and so that was saved for when you had really, really screwed up. And what it was 40 days in the wilderness, but it wasn't 40 days in the wilderness. It was you had to pass 40 days in the wilderness. And you would sleep in just your underwear at night, despite the fact that there would be male staff, and I was a female there, and just they didn't care if it was male staff or female watching you. You're just sleeping in your underwear. And the reason for that was so that you wouldn't run away. You were never allowed to speak. You could use hand symbols for your basic need. You could write in a journal, but they took the journal every night, so there was really no purpose in writing in it. And they would allow you to read the Bible, so that was your entertainment. You had to prepare all 3 of your meals and eat them and clean up within 30 minutes. And that includes starting a fire. So, without matches, by the way.
What?
Yeah. So with a bow staff, you'd start a fire. So you'd have to start a fire, boil your water, cook your food, eat your food, and clean up within 30 minutes, which resulted in eating a lot of uncooked oatmeal and uncooked rice and lentils, which would just give you the worst stomach cramps in the world. But you were starving, so you needed to eat something. And so you would do one of 2 things when you were on phase. You would either hike miles and miles and miles and miles all day long for, just sometimes in circles, or you would do forced labor. But if they didn't have a hike if the staff didn't feel like going on a hike, or they didn't have an actual chore for you to do, they would just come up with something for you to do, whether it was digging a 5x5x5 ditch, or moving a pile of rocks from point A to point B back to point A, or, chopping wood was great because at least it felt like, okay, like at least I'm doing something, but we weren't allowed to use that wood for our own fires. You were chopping the wood for the staff cabin that they were in. There was one really lucky day where I got to clean the cabin, though. That was great because the cabin was warmer than it was outside.
Jeez.
But yeah, I mean the all of the maintenance for the entire facility was taken care of by the students. But except for phase, all of the maintenance was also very gendered. So the girls the female residents did the cooking and the cleaning for the facility, whereas the boys would do most of like the carpentry type stuff if things needed to be fixed or painted. There was a mechanic shop because they had tractors and trucks and stuff like that. And so the guys,
gender stereotypes, basically.
huge gender stereotypes. And I remember I got in trouble one time because I asked to work in a mechanic shop, and they were like, that's not woman's work. That's literally what I was told, was that was not woman's work. And I just, I believe I even said, don't call me a lady or something like that. It was ridiculous, forcing these stereotypes onto us as if that was going to be of any therapeutic value whatsoever. On top of that, all of the staff were ridiculously unqualified. I think the entire time I was there might have been 3 people there that had maybe a college degree.
Coleman, while there, you attended one of the facility's counseling groups for survivors of sexual abuse, but none of the staff is really qualified to run such a group. So can you tell us what happened?
Yeah, so I ended up joining the group because I had told a friend in confidence about the rape, and then she went to the staff members and told them what I had told her, and so they told me I needed to start attending the group for sexual abuse survivors. It didn't really have any consistent staff that ever ran it, but there was one woman that would run it on occasion, and the reason that they would let her run it was because she was a rape survivor as well. And this woman, mind you, did not have she did not have a bachelor's degree in psychology or counseling. She had no counseling background, certification, training, anything. But for some reason, they thought it was a good idea to let her lead, at any given time between 6 and 10 of us young ladies who had suffered, rape and molestation and various forms of sexual abuse, to run this group. And her philosophy was that we needed to come to the understanding and acceptance of the fact that we were all raped and molested because it was our fault. We had put ourselves in those positions. We had seduced these men, and men can't control themselves, so it's our job to you're only raped because you put yourself in that position, and you shouldn't have been dressing that way, talking that way, you shouldn't have been in that place at that time, whatever the thing was. So that was her first philosophy. But her second philosophy was that all survivors of sexual abuse enjoyed the abuse. So it's really not abuse. So really, we just need to get over it. And this was something that was told, not just like once and a one-off, and then a staff member came in and said, whoa, no, we got to put an end to this. Like, that was completely wrong. That woman doesn't know what she's talking about. She's never going to run the group again. No, they let her do this multiple times over, and just ingraining this within us, which is like, so it's just compounding shame on shame, because you already have those feelings inside. You already question yourself and think, was it my fault? Did I do something to deserve this? And now you've got an adult telling you, yes, it was your fault. You do deserve this, but not only do you deserve it, admit it. You liked it. And so it was just ridiculous. And that was basically their therapeutic approach to everything. We were just bad children. And if we would just, come to Jesus, things would get better.
Well, it was while you were in Project Patch that you realized you were gay and fell in love for the first time. But the staff soon figured out what was going on.
Yeah.
And isn't that when the so-called conversion therapy started?
Yeah. So I wasn't terribly, I wasn't sneaky enough about my relationship with this girl. So as soon as they found out about it, I was sent to extra counseling sessions with the pastor there, which was basically their version of conversion therapy. And they already had, the heavy gender stereotyping there as well, which is a big part of conversion therapy in and of itself. It was ridiculous because I had a couple of staff members telling me, to their credit, there were a couple of staff members that were trying to tell me, oh no, it's not that you were having a relationship with a girl, it's that you were having a relationship. But because you were having a relationship with a girl, we need you to have these extra therapy sessions with the pastor because you need to realize the path that you're going down. And so I would go into these, quote, therapy sessions with the pastor, and they were basically just hour-long sessions of him berating me, telling me that I was going to hell, that, I grew up in San Francisco around, tons of gay people. I had lots of, gay aunts and uncles, and, being gay in my family has never been an issue. And I was told that, my parents were wrong. All of those people that I have loved my entire life were wrong. I had confided him at one point about a gentleman that I had known that had passed away from AIDS. And he had talked to me about how, that gentleman, it was God's wrath that killed him. It wasn't really AIDS that killed him. It was God's wrath, and that was God's punishment. He would sometimes sit over me and literally just like thunk me on the head with a Bible and just praying out loud about how, the devil had taken a hold of me and we needed to get the devil out of me and all of this crap. And I just had to just endure this crap for weeks.
Right. So after many months and many punishments, you gave in. You gave them what they wanted.
Yeah, I did, because I couldn't take it anymore. I was just, and I mean, I will have to admit, not every second of the place was brutal. I actually made a couple of friendships there. There were times that I remember laughing. There were times where, if I wasn't in trouble, like maybe we'd gone on like a nice hike and, had a nice day or something like that. I don't mean to sound like absolutely every second of it was brutal, but I mean, it was pretty brutal. But I realized at one point, the kids that are not questioning things, the kids that are just going along with how it is and keeping their nose clean, are having a much easier go of it. And they're much happier. Probably not really happier, but at least more comfortable. Mm-hmm. And so at one point I just figured, I'll just pretend like I just came to Jesus. So I went to the pastor. I acted like I wanted to repent my ways. I asked to be baptized. And I just pretended to go along with it. And I cannot believe how freaking gullible these people were. I mean, talk about stupidity. Like, really? You think a kid's just gonna, pretty much literally overnight went and pretended like I was just swallowing all of their bullshit.
Or perhaps they did know you were faking it, and they thought, as long as we get our little robot, Christian, that goes out there, who knows?
Yeah. Which unfortunately was a bit of a side effect of what happened. Because I spent about my last 6 months just pretending to be this way, so much so that when I left, I still acted that way for a couple of months. It took me a while to regain my personality. At one point, you pretend so much that it just kind of becomes your reality. But it was so much more comfortable, to behave that way, but my identity had completely gotten stripped away. I had no real sense of self. I wasn't, I was more comfortable. I was happier because I wasn't in trouble all the time, and I wasn't, being forced, into, there wasn't all the forced manual labor and all of the various other punishments, or, when like there was a period where I had to sleep in this closet with a glass door downstairs. Another time that I had gotten caught with my girlfriend, and it was so that everybody could keep their eyes on me, and, all of the shame stopped, and all of that had stopped. And so I was just grateful for all of that to stop, but I kind of did it at the price of my own dignity as it still.
But eventually your dad came and yanked you out of there, and that was a pretty interesting day, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. So he had visited me previously, they invited him to come to a service, and boy, was that a mistake, because they were just going on about, fire and brimstone and all this crap. And my dad finally woke up and realized, oh my God, these people are religious whack jobs, and they are off their rockers, and they have no idea what they're talking about, and they really believe this insane stuff. And so he immediately went and looked for another placement for me. And then, so next thing I knew, it was, just a couple of days after that, I get a call to go into my counselor's office, and my dad's on speakerphone, and he says, a couple of people are going to be there tomorrow, and they are going to take you to Utah, and you're going somewhere else. And I just went, okay. And I remember just sort of being like, oh crap, well, now what's going to happen? Luckily for me, I ended up going to a much nicer facility that was actually helpful, full of people that were actually qualified, and I actually did receive help. I go to therapy to this day, and basically every therapist that I've ever talked to in my life has said probably one of the, my mom died when I was young. I was abused by my father basically my entire life. I have had massive problems with drugs and alcohol. I've experienced a ton of loss in my life. I have been raped, and none of that was as bad as the trauma that I experienced at Project Patch.
Well, Coleman, that certainly is a very harrowing story, and thank you so much for speaking out. I guess you would consider yourself an activist now because you want to warn people about these places, isn't that right?
One of the happiest moments of my entire life was when a couple years ago, I started working with a woman who had reached out to me because she had seen a review that I had put up online about Project Patch. And so I have a pretty unique name, so she was able to find me on Facebook, and we started communicating, and she let me know that her daughter was in Project Patch. And so I just said, listen, I'd love to do anything I can to help you get your daughter out of there. She, the little girl's grandparents had custody of her, and they had sent her here, and the mom was trying to regain custody and get her out of Project Patch. And so when the mom was going through court proceedings, I wrote a letter to the judge, and eventually the mom did get custody of her daughter back and did get her daughter out of Patch. And
Right.
that was honestly, it made it worth it for me to have gone through that to help be able to get somebody out of there. For once I just said, okay, at least I was able to do something with it. Because this is an unfortunate area, this sort of outsourcing of parental responsibilities and punishment is a big thing, especially here in the US. But what people don't realize is that these places are killing children. I'm one of the lucky ones. I got out, I survived, I grew up, I have a wonderful life now. I have an amazing wife who I love more than anything in the world. I have a daughter who brings me more joy than I could have ever imagined possible. I have a business. I'm doing very well. I'm lucky. There are girls that were not so lucky. There are girls that killed themselves after Patch, and I genuinely believe that Patch and their stay there had a big reason that they committed suicide. There are girls that went right back into the abusive homes that they came from, and Patch did nothing about it because their parents were paying the bills, despite the fact that they were telling them, hey, my dad's raping me. There are girls that died from drug overdoses because guess what? Patch just thought that the solution to drug addiction was just praying about it. If you just pray about it, your problems will be solved. Because these people are unqualified, and quite frankly, a lot of them just really seem to get off on abusing kids. It just really seemed to bring them a lot of joy.
Yeah, I heard that a lot from other people I've interviewed in this series. It just seems to be as
It attracts
Yeah, a haven for sociopaths is one of my interviewees called it.
Definitely is. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that this is an extraordinarily underregulated industry.
Mm-hmm.
And these places are able to hire people that, you know, are just going into because they like to abuse kids, you know, and it's because there's no oversight. Nobody's going into these places and making sure, you know, are these people qualified? Are they there for the right reasons? You know, and I think that's what bugs me the most is that, you know, why in the world is a place like, you know, because a lot of people think, oh, no, these, you know, these are those places that are out in Colombia, and these are those places that are, you know, that this happens in North Korea. This doesn't happen in the U.S. No, this is happening right here in the U.S. You know, in Idaho, in Utah, even in parts of Oregon, there are places, you know, and it's because nobody's regulating it and nobody's paying attention to it. And it drives me absolutely insane that people are not storming the Capitol demanding that the bill that Sia has been trying to push through is not going through. It's ridiculous that it took years for them to even find a sponsor for the bill.
And Sia, for anyone who doesn't know, is Survivors of Institutional Abuse.
Yes, Survivors of Institutional Abuse. They're a great organization. It was started by I believe it was started by a young woman who herself had gone through one of these places, and there's a bill that they helped out with, which was basically to try to prevent these places from existing and try to create some oversight, because there are times when kids need help. And maybe as a last resort, you might have to send your child to a facility. But there is no reason that these facilities should not be, you know, regulated and overseen with extraordinary diligence, because you're talking about kids here.
If anyone wants to get in touch with you, I'll put contact details in the description below, and to see it as well. And all that's left to say is thank you once again, and hopefully we'll catch up with you in the future if there are any new developments.
Yeah. I will definitely keep in touch.